My Lords, I wasn't here yesterday, but I listened very carefully, and quite honestly I was very disappointed in these bills. These bills that will be coming before us, they offer nothing to the disadvantaged. They offer nothing to the vulnerable. The poor and the disabled are virtually ignored, and this means that these bills will open up the rich-poor divide even more than it has been opened up already by this government. And I think that it is a shame that this is happening, and this is something the government really has to deal with. There are a few issues that I'm going to raise that I would like answers on, and I'll flag them up as I come to them. One issue is that the idea of infrastructure is always very interesting because for decades now, new power stations and so on have been put into infrastructure, and energy supply projects have been put into infrastructure, which means they're relatively protected from funding cuts and so on. And yet, if we look at energy efficiency programs, they aren't in the infrastructure, under the infrastructure tag. Now, why is that not? Because actually a good energy efficiency program means you don't have to build the new power stations, and therefore why isn't that infrastructure as well? I would like an answer to that. Secondly, all infrastructure projects, I assume, are assessed for their economic, social and environmental benefits. And are they actually prioritised according to the most beneficial? Because it seems clear to me that many of the bills, many of the policies in here just don't have any concept of what's good for people and what's good for the planet. It's obvious that spending restrictions in the future on capital investment in infrastructure is going to be much less than on other areas, and so we really need to put as much as we possibly can into away from funding cuts. That's absolutely crucial. And finally, this infrastructure bill actually seems to offer assistance to big oil companies and house builders, but not to hard-pressed householders themselves. It builds on the tax breaks that fossil fuel companies have already been given in the hope that they will find gas and sell it cheaply to bring down bills. But if that money were given to householders to actually insulate their homes, that is actually a much more efficient use of the money, and of course overall much better for the environment. All that hoping about the big companies doing the right thing is a madness. It's a forlorn hope, and we really have to think about better ways to protect ourselves. We really shouldn't be spending public funds on extraction of fossil fuels that would be better left underground. It seems to me that this government has not understood the IPCC recent report, where it says there's a clear message from science: to avoid dangerous interference with the climate system, we need to move away from business as usual. And the infrastructure bill as well, it gives new freedoms to the Highways Agency for roads construction and planning changes to fast-track developments. Now, building new roads with the problems that we have already with our carbon emissions is, again, an absolute madness. I just don't understand how any government could think that this is all right. And global agreements on climate change are wonderful. We really need them, but they come to absolutely nothing if the governments who are actually setting the policies and spending the money don't understand what climate change means. I would like to mention specifically the fracking trespass bill. This bill introduces a new right of corporate trespass for oil and gas companies, and I think it threatens homeowners across Britain because it will allow companies to run shale gas pipelines under private land without seeking the consent of homeowners. Now, I understand that the Prime Minister in the other place said today, in response to a question from Caroline Lucas, MP, he said it won't be legal to frack against a property owner's will. Could you clarify that point, please, and tell me if the Prime Minister is speaking for the whole party? Now, the bill as well, the fracking trespass bill as well, would decimate our environmental and climate infrastructure. It won't only make local conditions very bad in terms of the pollution that it will cause and the lorry movements and so on. It will actually mean a development of a whole new fossil fuel industry that will make it impossible for us to keep to our climate change targets. And the third thing about this bill, it suggests the government has already chosen the National Grid's slow progression energy scenario, but has actually kept quiet about this. Could you let me know if that's true? Because in 2012, the National Grid released a report on UK future energy scenarios with 3 options. The first was slow progression, which assumes climate targets are abandoned. The second one was gone green, which was to meet climate targets, and accelerated growth, which was about meeting climate targets early. Now, it suggests you've chosen the slow progression and have effectively abandoned the whole concept of climate change. I'm going to say now what I really would have liked to have seen in your plans for next year. These are 4 things. You could still introduce them, and perhaps if, we can discuss them afterwards if you would like to take them up. The first is a fossil fuels divestment bill, and this is a bill to require the withdrawal of all public funds that are directly or indirectly supporting companies or activities involving the exploration and extraction of fossil fuels, domestically and internationally, and to reinvest all such funds in zero carbon energy generation and energy conservation measures, a much better use of the money. The second bill would be a fair pay bill, a bill to set a company-wide pay ratio of 10 to 1. That is, that the CEO should only get 10 times, let me explain this better. The lowest paid worker in a company should get a tenth of what the CEO is paid. So you pay the CEO whatever you think he's worth, she's worth, but you make sure that your cleaner or your security guard is paid at least a tenth of that. And that would start to rebalance the rich-poor divide that is widening under this government. The third bill is a public ownership bill, which would promote public ownership of public services and to introduce a presumption in favour of service provision by public sector and not-for-profit entities, and to put in place mechanisms to increase the accountability, transparency and public control of public services, including those operated by public companies. And fourthly, a housing bill, a bill to prevent rent increases above inflation for existing tenants and to increase security of tenure with 5-year tenancy agreements. Now, a little bit of this is being done in London, and it looks as if it could be extremely successful. And with the problems that we do have already in housing in London, it would seem quite logical to produce something like this. But I don't want to sound alarmist, and when I talk about destroying the planet, I'm not talking really about destroying the planet. I'm talking about destroying the little bit of the planet that we rely on for our existence. And the fact is, if we don't take climate change into account, if we continue with business as usual, we are damaging not only our future, our children's and grandchildren's future.